All right, welcome everybody to the May edition of Vue.DC, where we'll be creating a modern web app using Vue and Spring Boot with JHipster featuring Theo. As far as logistics are concerned, for those of you who are joining us for the first time remotely, as you'll notice that there's a Q&A panel inside of your Zoom toolbar. This will allow you to basically send questions. Oh, I thought we had the UI.
It's a slide before.
I don't know why it skipped. Okay, so you'll see that there's a Q&A button down here inside of your toolbar that will allow you to ask questions that then everyone can see, and then people can go ahead and upvote those, and then we'll make sure to go ahead and answer those as we go throughout the talk. So yep, I think those are the main things to know. And then, as far as the organizers go, so yeah, my name is Ben Hong. I'm on the Vue core team, and I work at Cypress right now. And we also have Tracy Holinka with us. So let's say hello, Tracy.
Hey, hey.
Coming from us with Bloomberg, and Chris Gray from Politico.
Hey, everyone.
And Jack Kappa, unfortunately cannot make it tonight, but the four of us have been helping to organize UDC, and it's been a blast hosting these events. So yeah, as far as an update, we're now at 942 members, so we're inching up towards the 1,000 mark. So it'll be exciting when we cross that milestone. But yeah, it's been crazy to think that we just started this in 2017 and sort of a whim, and ever since then it's been really great and a lot of fun. So basically, you can expect to see at least one meetup a month, usually on the third Wednesday of the month. But again, you can keep track of us on the meetup.com page. As far as upcoming meetups, as of this point, we should be on June 17th having Kim Maida giving us a talk on 7 secrets of highly successful developers. So be sure to check that one out. That was one of Jack's favorite ones from the Vue Vixens Day at the VueConf US earlier this year. And in July, we are going to have a round of lightning talks. So for anyone who wants to give a talk or has been thinking about it, this is your chance to do so. And you can go ahead and submit a proposal at our bit.ly link, vuedc-july-talks. Or, again, if you just want to reach us directly to us at vuejsdc@gmail.com, we can take care of you from there. Finally, as far as support goes, just so you know, we have a bunch of resources for you. We got a bunch of now vanity links. So if you want to join us on Discord, it's just vuedc.io/discord. Or you can just bookmark our site at vuedc.io. And fun fact, I think Jack got us our vanity URL for YouTube. So now we actually are youtube.com/c/vuedc. So exciting stuff. All right, and with that, I think I'll let Nicholas give the introduction to Theo.
Yeah, so while Theo pulls up his presentation, quick little bio about Ippon USA. So we're a rather small consulting firm, actually headquartered in Paris, France, but we do have a US headquarters in Richmond, Virginia, with offices in Washington, DC and New York City. So I'm based in DC, Theo's actually based in New York City. So fortunately for him, he's on total lockdown mode, but happy enough to give us a talk tonight. Just a bit of background on what we do. We're mostly a services consulting company, specializing in anything from full stack development to cloud implementation and architecture and engineering to anything data related, anything agile related. As Theo will talk about, he'll kind of cover all bases really when it comes to Ippon. I see Chris Anatolio just commented, hey Chris. So yeah, I'll hand it off to Theo now. So take it away.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Nick. Thank you everyone for attending my talk. So it's going to be, I've got some trouble with the slides, sorry for that. But it's going to be on how to create a modern web app using Vue.js and Spring Boot with JHipster. So let's just first start with the classic speaker slide. So my name is Theo Lebrun. I'm a solution architect and a technical manager at Ippon USA. You can see the social network link for my GitHub account or my Twitter or even my website if you want to check on me and send me some messages or just follow me. And also about JHipster, I'm a contributor. I did 44 pull requests so far. I've been using JHipster since, I don't know, 2015, 2016. So I know JHipster a lot. And like I say, I did a lot of contributions. So again, if you have any question on JHipster, feel free to ask me and I will be able to answer that. So first, let's start with the classic question: what is a JHipster? So in order to answer this question, I'm just simply going to go on the main website, which is jhipster.tech. And yeah, I'm just going to tell you about JHipster. So the goal of JHipster is to generate a complete and modern web app or microservice architecture that will unify, high performance and robust server-side stack with a Spring Boot, and then a modern and a mobile first UI with Angular, React, or Vue.js. When JHipster started, it was only supporting Spring Boot and Angular, and I think even it was Angular.js. But anyway, and now you can use Angular, you can use React, and even Vue, like we're going to see in this talk today. And also for the backend, you can use Spring Boot, but you can also use other technologies like Node.js or .NET. I never really used the other technologies. I think they're still in beta mode, so I would recommend using Spring Boot if you want to have something robust and that is working fully. And also the good thing of JHipster is that it will provide you a lot of tools that we're going to see later. The goal of those tools, is to help you with some technologies like Docker or Kubernetes, or even if you want to deploy your application on AWS, Azure, or GCP. So let's just go back to the presentation. Hold on, because I have the small, okay, should be fine. So JHipster is 100% free and open source. You can fork the project, you can make the changes, you can do whatever you want. That's something that I love about JHipster, is that really, if you want to do changes for your for your personal website or things like that, you can feel free to fork the project and make those changes. The thing is, JHipster is quite a big project. It's I'm pulling up the GitHub repo right now, but yeah, it's over 20,000 commits, 500 contributors. So it's having a project that big and being open source is always quite a big challenge, because that's a lot of free time that people spend contributing to the project. So the way JHipster work is it use Open Collective. I don't know if you're familiar with Open Collective, but it is a way basically to make your community more sustainable. The way it works is pretty simple. People donate money every month. You can start with just $2, or if you want to go big, you can donate $1,000 per month. For example, one of the top organization, Okta, donated $29,000 so far. So that's quite a lot of money. And then with all this money, you have a budget. And you will be able, we will be able, the contributor, the maintainers of JHipster will be able to spend this money. One great way of spending it is with bug bounties. So for example, if I go back on the GitHub page and then into the issues tab, you can see that some of the issues, they have a bug bounty label. And the idea is basically that if you fix the bug, you will be rewarded with the amount of money from the bug bounty. And it goes from $100 to $500. So, it's a cool way of fixing bugs and making some money. And also, if you want to learn about JHipster, if you want to learn about the source code, the best way, I will be honest, is to just, pick up an issue and try to fix it, because they will really let you dive into the code and let you understand how everything works. And also as a bonus, you will make some money. So, that's pretty cool. Okay, so let's go back to the presentation. What JHipster is good for. I personally use JHipster a lot for POCs when I want, to start a small project, and I don't want to spend a lot of time, creating the backend, the front end, and connecting everything together. With JHipster, I will be able to do that very fast, in less than an hour. I will be able to have an application running. And if I want, I can even deploy this application to the cloud with the tools that JHipster provide. We're going to check that later. But again, if you want to do a business application, a web application, or even a mobile application, because there's a module for JHipster, Ionic, they will let you, I don't know if you used Ionic before, but it will let you build a web application based on your JHipster app. So again, that's pretty cool and pretty easy, if you want to extend your application. About the architecture is pretty simple. JHipster is like a single page application. You can choose the database. We're going to see that later when I'm going to do my demo about JHipster, but basically you'll be able to choose any kind of database you want to use. You can also plug in like external services like Elasticsearch or Kafka. And then for the front end, you will choose between Angular, React, or Vue. And everything will be packaged into a static HTML page that will load your single page application. The way it works is pretty simple. The application makes REST requests to the backend talk with the database, and then the data come back to the front end. All the business logic, all the security is on the backend level, and of course, all the UI is at the front end level. I have a small diagram on the architecture. But again, like I say, it's pretty simple. You have your web browser, for example, Chrome, makes like HTTP requests to your front-end framework, and then your framework will make REST requests to your Spring Boot, then the request to the database, and then you will get back your data on the front end. So then JHipster, what is being generated by JHipster? Pretty much like everything, to be honest. JHipster will like generate the backend. So like I said, Spring Boot, generate the front end. So again, you can choose between Angular, React, or Vue. You can even choose to don't have any front end. For example, if you have a microservice, it's only going to do like HTTP requests with the backend. And then also JHipster will generate tools that will make your life easy as a developer. So for example, you will have Webpack, you will have Liquibase. If you don't know what Liquibase is basically a version control for your database. So like I say, JHipster will generate like a set of tools to make your life easier as a developer. And then after you generate the application, you will be able to run what we call sub-generators in order to add new features to your application. So the main one is the entity sub-generator, because you generate an application, that's cool, but it's kind of like empty. So you want to add entities. So you're going to use the entity sub-generator for that. I'm going to show you that later again. And then you also have a lot of different sub-generators. For example, you have a CI/CD one if you want to use Jenkins or GitLab CI. You can also use some deployment sub-generators if you want to deploy on AWS, Azure, or GCP. And also if you want to play with Docker, you can generate a big Docker Compose file based on your architecture. That is pretty useful if you decided to go for a microservice architecture, or even Kubernetes if you want. And then why Vue.js was picked by the JHipster team, because like I said, when JHipster started, it was only Angular, then React was added, and then Vue.js. So about Vue.js, it's a trending front-end framework. It's lightweight and easy to learn, pretty similar to Angular. So if you play with Angular before, doing stuff with Vue.js is pretty easy as well. And also, as you can see, the size is pretty small. I know the table, the data, the sizes are like pretty obsolete because the version is only 2.4.2. But the main idea is to show that Vue is pretty lightweight. And to give you like a little bit of story about Vue.js, it was started by like members of the team, and they, like I'm going to tell later, they decided to go for like a blueprint, which is basically a way to provide your own templates. But they decided to like do this project in parallel with JHipster, because right now with JHipster, you can choose between React or Angular. You cannot choose with Vue, but by using a blueprint, you will be able to use Vue. So, they just decided, like I said, to do something like in parallel instead of doing changes directly on the main generator. So like I said, the blueprint, what is a blueprint? I'm just going to talk a little bit about it because it's a cool concept. The idea, the main goal of the blueprint is to provide your own templates. What it is useful for is, for example, you're using JHipster at your company, inside your company, and it is like you need to use, for example, specific set of colors. I don't know, you want some UI components. You want maybe some extra security on the back end, some extra, let's say, jars if it's a Spring Boot app. And what you don't really want to do is you generate your app and then you make all those changes manually. That will take a lot of time, because let's say you generate 10 apps. Every time you're gonna have you will have to make those changes manually. So it's kind of like you don't really want to do that. So the idea of a blueprint is to be able to provide your own templates. And then JHipster will use those templates for you and will generate everything using those templates. So that way you don't have to make those changes. You will make the changes in the templates and then they will be used by JHipster. Right now, there are like two big templates. There's a JHipster Kotlin, which basically will replace the backend. It will still be Spring Boot, but instead of being regular Java, it will be Kotlin. And then the one I'm going to talk about today, which is Vue.js. We can maybe take a look at it on GitHub. There we go. So yeah, it's a blueprint, like I said. You have all the instruction on how to install the blueprint and how to use it. But you're going to see it's like pretty simple and pretty straightforward. So now let's start with the demo. I'm going to show you basically how to generate the application and use the Vue.js blueprint, how to generate entities with what we call a JDL for JHipster domain language. And then I will do a small, like a walkthrough through Vue.js, like how JHipster generated the app, how the components are organized and everything. And also there's a blog post about this talk, you know, if you want like more details and if you want to read a blog about it. I'm going to share the slides after this presentation, so that way you will be able to have access to all the links through the presentation. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to start my terminal. Going to like increase a little bit. I'm going to go into, you know, classic empty folder. And then I already have JHipster installed, but if you need to install JHipster, it is pretty easy to install if you're like on a Mac, for example, because you can just use brew. There's a package called JHipster, so you can just do brew install JHipster, and it will install JHipster on your laptop and configure everything for you. So like I said, first step, you install JHipster. The second step is to install the Vue.js blueprint in order to use it. So to do that, you can just use npm install generator -jhipster -vue.js, and then you can install the module globally. And that might take a while depending on npm. I mean, last time I ran it took like 10 seconds, but yeah. And then once you're done with that, you're like pretty much all set. You can just use JHipster with the Vue.js module, blueprints. In order to do that, let's just wait until npm is over. Hopefully it's not going to take too long. Okay, that's done. So you can run JHipster, which is the main command. So if I run JHipster without any command, it's just going to use, do the regular flow. But in my case, I want to use the blueprint. So that's why I'm going to use the flag blueprints, because you can specify multiple blueprints if you want. But in our case, we're just going to use the Vue.js one. So I'm going to run the command. And the way JHipster works is going to ask me like multiple questions, and I'm going to choose which answer for each questions. So it's like interactive and everything. It could be like a little bit complex at first, because it's quite a lot of questions, and sometimes they're like a little bit confusing, because if you just want to do an application like that is pretty simple, most of the time you're just going to answer all the question by default. But if you want to know more about the question, I recommend going on the website and into the menu core JHipster task. There's a link creating an application, and with like a quick start tutorial, and it will tell you each question and which answer is possible with more details. So I recommend reading that if you want to do something like do an application that is like a little bit more complicated than the default one. But in our case, we're just going to answer like basically the default question, the default answer for every question. So for example, here, we just want to do a monolithic application. We don't want to do a microservice architecture. Then we don't want to use a Spring Web Flux. It's like an alpha feature. So let's wait a little bit. Let's call our application Vue.dc. About the Java package name, same thing, the default one. JHipster registry is like a feature that is pretty useful if you're going to production, because it will like help you configure, monitor, and scale your application. But again, for us, we're not going to go to production for now, so we can just say no and not enable the JHipster registry. For the authentication, we're going to pick like a regular, token authentication. But if you want, you can have a session-based or even OAuth 2 with like Okta and Keycloak. But in our case, we're just going to stick, with the simple answer. But the kind of database, SQL, pretty simple, MySQL for production. So for development, you can use MySQL too, but in our case, we're just going to use an H2 disk-based database. So that way, I don't have to start MySQL in the background or whatever. It's just going to create a file on my disk, and that's all. Same thing for like the Spring Cache abstraction and Hibernate, just the answers, sorry. And here, Maven or Gradle, I personally prefer Maven. So, just going to pick Maven. And then you can like choose other technologies to plug in with your JHipster application. So for example, if you want to do some search, you can use Elasticsearch, WebSockets if you want to do some real time on the UI, and Kafka for like messaging. We're not going to do any of those. And now it's take a while because it's actually loading the blueprints. And here it's telling me which framework would you like to use for the client. And the only option is Vue.js, which is exactly what we want, because usually you can choose between Angular or React, or even no front-end framework if you want. In our case, because I loaded the blueprint, I have one choice, which is the Vue.js blueprint. So far that's good. That's what we want. Then we can choose, like a boot swatch theme. Let's just stick with default. Internationalization, I'm going to say yes. English with the native language, and then let's pick French for the like an additional language. And then if you want, you can enable some testing frameworks. I know the JHipster team wants to support Cypress.io for that. So hopefully in like in few months, we'll be able to choose Cypress too. And then, no, I don't want any other generators from the marketplace. So I'm just going to like answer the last question. As you can see, JHipster is now generating the files. So the generation is pretty fast. You will see it will be over soon in a few seconds. It generates a lot of files. You have here, for example, you have all the JSON for like all the text for the UI. Then you have all the test JavaScript files. Then you have all the web apps, so the Vue.js files. And then if we scroll a little bit more, we will see all the Docker files, it's called the Spring Boot files and everything. And then when everything is done, JHipster is going to run npm install. So that might take a little bit longer because it needs to install all the packages and everything. So I'm just going to go ahead and open the project in VS Code. So meanwhile, I can show you a little bit more. Okay. So I'm just going to talk a little bit more about the architecture of the project. But it's pretty simple. There's a README, in case you want to know all the details about the app. In the README, you will have a lot of information like how to start the app, how to add some features, manage dependencies. There's all the .files that configure all the components and tools that JHipster use. One file that I like a lot is this one, the your.rc.json. It basically contains the application configuration. It's the answers from the question that JHipster asked. So you see, for example, here you can see all the question that JHipster asked me. You can see all the value that I answered. So that is pretty useful when you want, you have a brand new app and you want to check out like what is the configuration, like what kind of front-end framework is used, what kind of build tool. For example, here it says Maven. So that's pretty useful file. My npm install, it's still running. Like I said, it's going to take a while. But meanwhile, I can show you, for example, the Webpack folder. So JHipster uses Webpack to compile all the JavaScript or TypeScript code of Vue.js. You have two profiles. You have the dev and the production profile. By default, it will use the dev one, but the main difference between the two is like, oops, in the production profile, you know, Webpack will like minify, I'll do like a lot of optimization for the CSS, the JavaScript and everything. So you don't really want to use that in when you're doing some development, because it just makes things like, especially if you're like inspecting the code, it's make things complicated. On the other hand, the dev profile will use a dev server that I'm going to showcase later with like a lot of different plugins to make your life easier as a developer. So, okay, I think everything is over. So, okay, NPM install was successful. So now the app is complete. As you can see, it generated like a Git repository for me and did the first commit with all the sources. So that's pretty cool. So if, you know, if I can just plug in a remote and start doing pushes. So that's pretty useful. What I'm going to do, I'm going to start the project right now with the Maven command. So by default, like I don't have to specify any goal. I can just run the Maven command with a Maven wrapper, and it's just going to start the project. So what it's going to do is going to compile the project, compile the front end as well. So backend and front end, and then start the project. Meanwhile, I can show you a little bit more about, so Webpack, I think I say a lot of stuff about it. We have the source folder, which contain the main sources of the project. So we have a Docker folder where you have all the Docker Compose files. So that's pretty useful if you know you want to run your application on containers. You already have a Docker Compose file to be able to do that. You can see it will extend the MySQL Docker Compose file, sorry. So you can just start this Docker Compose and it will spin up a MySQL database for you, configure the data source for Spring Boot, and then expose everything on the port 8080. You also have a monitoring file if you know you want to have monitoring with Prometheus and Grafana. Then you have the Java folder, which contain all the Spring Boot sources. I'm not going to go in a lot into details because we don't really care about Spring Boot right now. I think we're more interested into the web app folder with Vue.js. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the resource folder. It contains the resource files for the backend for Spring Boot. And what's very important is the config files. So you can see you have a dev and production files. So again, same thing for Webpack. You have a dev profile and a production profile. So here you have all the properties of your Spring Boot app. What's important, for example, is the URL for your data source. I'm going to focus on the dev one because we don't really care about production right now. And here, something that I'm going to show you is Liquibase. There's a context. It's called Faker. What it's going to do is going to inject fake data into the database. So again, this is only for dev. It kind of, it makes your life easier. So you don't have to create, when you create entities, you don't have to insert like stupid entities into your database. Faker will do it for you. But in case you want to disable this feature, you can just remove the context Faker here, and that way Faker will not inject fake data into your dev database. And then finally, the web app folder. So content is like, the CSS images. Then you have the folder for the languages, so English or French. And then finally, the app folder, which contain our Vue.js app. And if I go to the main TS app, I can see here my main Vue instance that configure, all my services, that configure my router, that configures my state store and internationalization. But we're going to take a look at that later. First, I'm going to do a small demo of the application itself. So yeah, meanwhile, the application started and everything. You can see the Spring Boot start text, and now it's running on the port 8080. So I'm going to go on it. And this is my JHipster app. I can log into it. JHipster will create two users by default, a user which is a regular user, and then admin, which is an admin. I can log in, so it's pretty simple. It's user. Of course, don't go to the magic world of production with those username and password. But in dev, it is totally fine. So yeah, just logged in with the regular user. Right now, I don't have any entities. We're gonna add them later. I can, if I want, like switch the language between French and English. and then access, the settings if I want to change settings for my user, my password. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to log in with the admin account, because I have a new menu, which is administration, and I'm going to showcase that a little bit because there's like a lot of useful features in this menu. So the first one is user management, which basically, lets you add, like, create users, change users, or remove users. That is pretty useful if you want to temporarily add users. The metrics page that will show you all the metrics about your backend, the JVM metrics. So you have like all like useful information. You can also see like the requests that are made. So for example, if I refresh that, it should like increase. Yeah, you see the metrics. I can see the count one, and it's like all read time. I mean, every time I refresh, they will increase the number of time the endpoint was called. Also, I have some statistics for like cache, and then like the data source. So that's like a pretty cool page to see all the metrics. I have a health check page that tells me that everything works fine. Configuration that basically gives me all the properties of my Spring Boot application. So there's like a lot of properties again, but sometimes it is useful if you're not sure about the value of a property, you can search in real time and see it here. Then audits, it will simply tell you who successfully logged in. So example here, we can see that the user logged in and then the admin did too. Then logs, if you want to change the log level of your Spring Boot app, you can also do it real time. API is pretty useful. So, JHipster will like expose a Swagger for you at this endpoint. And then this Swagger is being used by Swagger UI and will give you like a small UI if you want to run some REST calls directly through your browser. So you don't have to use, I don't know, Postman or like curl. So for example, if I use the get all users, I can try it out, execute, and here in the response body, I have all my users returned. And then finally, the last one, database. So in our case, if you remember, I decided to use an H2 database, like a disk-based database for dev. So because of that, I have access to an H2 console, so I can log in. I can see my tables, I can add stuff in it and everything. So that's pretty useful. Again, it's only for dev purpose, like on production, you don't really want to have that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. But again, like we're kind of like, missing entities. So what I'm going to do next is generate those entities. So I'm just going to like kill the whole process. And in order to generate entities, I'm going to use a tool called JDL Studio. So JDL stands for JHipster Domain Language. And the idea is that you can define your entities, like in a nice way. You also have a diagram to show you that, because another way of, generating entities with JHipster is through the main generator. So I'm just going to use it to show you. The big problem with that is, first of all, you generate like entities one by one. So, that's kind of verbose. And also you can see, you have to answer questions. And let's say you make a mistake at the last question, you need to start over. So you don't really want to do that. It was the first, I would say the first subgenerator to be working for JHipster, but now you don't really want to use it because, it's just too complex. And like I say, if you make a mistake, you need to start over. So the way of doing it, like the right way of doing it is to use a JDL. So in our case, I already did drafted like a simple JDL. So I have a bank account, label, operation. They have a name, like bank account, for example, have a name that is required as a balance that is required as well. Label has a minimum length of 3. And then all those entities, they have relationship between each other. So for example, a bank account can have multiple operation. A user can have multiple bank accounts, and then multiple operation can have multiple labels. So that's pretty cool. It's like pretty fast and easy to use. You can have access to the documentation and everything. There's also like samples online if you want, to have some example entities or like even a JDL. So I'm going to copy paste the JDL, and then I'm going to create a new file here. I'm just going to call it entities.jdl and just paste my JDL. And then the next step is, to tell JHipster to import this JDL and generate all the entities. So in order to do that, I go back to my terminal, and then hold on, there's just moving that. Okay. So I can do JHipster import JDL and then the name of my file. So in that case, entities.jdl. So what it's going to do, it's going to tell JHipster, to parse the JDL. As you will see, it was able to see, you can see like fund entities, bank account, label, operation, and then it starts generating those 3 entities. And here it's asking me like, hey, like this file, liquid-based master, already exists. What you want to do you want to overwrite it? Do you want to ignore it? So usually what you say A. So it's just going to overwrite the file and also all the others, which makes sense because you're like generating entities. So you don't really you want to like keep the the files that are being generated. You don't want to keep the old ones. And then the generation was already completed. We can see the files right now that were generated. And then it's going to build the front end. So that should not take too long. But meanwhile, we can take a look at the sources. I'm just going to show the web app folder. Again, we don't really care about Spring Boot for now. And now we have a new folder called entities. And we can see the bank account, label, and operation folder. And also, if I go to my main Vue.js instance, here in provide, I have 3 new services. I have bank account service, label service, and operation service. So JHipster is smart enough, to automatically insert the new services, so you don't have to manually declare them. Okay, so now that everything is completed, I'm just going to restart the app. And in parallel, I'm going to do another process, which is npm start. The reason I'm doing that is because I want to showcase to you a cool feature with Webpack that will make your life easier as a developer. So I'm basically starting 2 processes, the backend and the front end. I'm not really starting the front end. It's just I would say a real-time front end. If I want, because before I didn't do npm start, but in order to make your life easier, I'm going to start it too. So it's running on the port 9000, but it's basically using different plugins, and the main one is called browser sync that will basically let you refresh the browser every time you make changes, so you don't have to go back and manually refresh. So that's pretty cool feature. So for now, you can say it's not working because it tries to connect to the backend, but the backend is not started yet. So let's wait a little bit to have the backend all running, which should be in soon because it's already starting the Spring Boot project. And let's see. Okay, so now the backend is started. So again, I'm going to stay on the localhost 9000. And I'm going to log in. So I'm going to log in with my user account. And now I have, in my entities menu, I have access to my 3 entities, bank account, label, operation. And if I go, for example, to bank account, if you remember, I was talking about Faker that was inserting data. And that's why there's already data into the database. So I already got bank accounts, same thing for labels, same thing for operation. And if I want, I can change the bank account number 1. I can link it to my user. Then if I go to operation, I can, let's say, I don't know, take the first operation. I can choose some labels and choose the bank account number 1. Also, it generates links between the entities, so you can easily navigate. And all that data is actually persisted. If I go to the H2 database, and for example, if I go to my bank account table, you can see here my row monitor. my bank account monitor got the user ID 4, which is, the one I just did with user. So that's pretty cool. Again, if you don't want those fake data, you just need to remove the faker context from the application -dev. But yeah, for this demo, I'm gonna keep using it. And then, so let me show you the why I want you to to use the port 9000. So now I'm like seeing my bank account. If I go to my bank account folder, I'm gonna I have different components. So I have the detail components, which is this page that basically give me the details of my bank account. Then I have the update page. So if I click edit, so both the update and create page is the same page. At the end is the update components. And then just the bank account component, which is the main page that shows all my bank accounts. So if I go on the first one, detail, and I open the Vue file, the template, let me reduce that. So here I have my Vue template. It's pretty straightforward. And for example, I want to hide my name, the name of the bank account. So I'm just looking at the source code, and I know, okay, here bank account name. So I'm just going to comment those 2 lines. The DT and DD, and then I go back to my browser. It refresh automatically, and you can see the row was removed. So that's the feature of having the npm start command running, is because every time I do changes, it will detect those changes, and it will automatically refresh the browser for you. So that way you can save time and focus on doing your development. And also, I don't know if you saw, but I'm just going to uncomment and save. And here, I'm not touching everything. The browser is going to refresh automatically, so I don't have to manually refresh or anything. So that's a pretty cool feature that will save you a lot of time. And the cool thing is it actually works also for example, if I open the bank account JSON, so that's the JSON that is in charge of the text. So here I'm in the English one, and let's say title. If I want, for example, to have bank account 123, it should be able to, yeah, you see, it was able to pick up the changes. So it works for a JSON, the languages, but it also works for your regular, Vue file, or even the component. So that, again, that's a pretty cool feature. Like I said, that will save you a lot of time. So now let's take a look a little bit more about the Vue.js, how JHipster, generate a whole Vue.js app. So let's look again to the main TS file. So here, like I say, you have the main Vue instance object with all your services injected. If we take a look, for example, at the router, so this file, something I like with Vue is that all your routes are in the same file. So, that way it's easier to manage. You don't have, because I know in Angular, sometimes you have routes for each component, in a different file. So you end up having a file for each component. That's could be a little bit complex. But here everything is in one file, and you can see that you have. That's how you, for example, you manage authorities that you say, oh, in order to access admin audits, for example, you need to have the authority admin. So you need to be an admin. And here you have all the routes from, for example, bank account that were added automatically by JHipster. So that's one thing, the routes. Also, we can take a look at the translation service. So I use the module Vue and -internationalization for all the translation components. But basically, it's pretty simple. I already show you a lot of the JSON, and then it set everything into the local storage. And that way, if you change the language, all the text changes on the fly. So that's a pretty useful feature. In order to use that in your templates, if we take a look, I'm just going to keep looking at bank account details. But here you see you have $T, and so you can call this function, and then you simply pass the key of your message. So for example, if I go, oops, that was the wrong shortcut. if I go to bankaccount.json, I can, I can like find the text, and then based on the keys, I can simply like use the same here in order to load the text that I want to show. So again, I use the $T function to do that. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the translation service. And then the final one is the store. Store is, I mean, we use the regular Vuex store, so nothing crazy, nothing like, we can take a look at the configuration, but I think it's in shared config, yeah, store. It basically, you have like 3 different stores. You have account store, which store I would say the connected user. So, if you want to access the username, the email, or like other properties, all the roles, like the authorities, if a user or if it's an admin. Alert store, that's to manage all the alerting system, like when I go to my bank account and for example, I remove this one, I will have a small alert about it. And then the translation store that manage all the translations. Next to that, just to reduce that. If you remember, like, let me open again the JDL. In the JDL, we set up like some validation. For example, we said the name of the bank account is required. Same thing for balance, label, it needs to be like minimum 3 characters and required. So all the validation on the Vue.js part is using a component, a module called Validate. So if I take a look at, for example, the update page, the update component, here you can see I define my validations. So I say, okay, my bank account, the name is required, the balance is required, and needs to be numeric. All those components, like I said, are from the Validate module. And then in the template, so if I open the template for bank account update, I can use this property, $V. So here I will have access, to like all the validation properties, like for example, if it's invalid or if it's like any dirty, again, you have access to like, if it's required, you have access to whatever you define in your components here. And yeah, like all that was generated by JHipster based on your JDL. So, that is pretty powerful. And it will also do the same thing for the model in the backend. But, we don't really care about the backend right now. But yeah, anyway, let's take a look at the bank account update component. So, okay, we saw first all the validation stuff. And then here, you have the alert service, like what you want to like show alerts, the bank account service, because, you won't be able to save a bank account, operation, because you want to load the operations. And then the user, because same thing, you want to be able to choose a user when you create or update a bank account. And then you have like all the code of the components. For example, the save method, that is the main method of this component, I would say. Yeah, you have, it's pretty straightforward. You have, if the bank account has an ID, you're going to update. If it doesn't have an ID, you're going to create the bank account from scratch. And then you're going to show the message through your alerts. So yeah, like all that, again, everything was generated by JHipster and with the JDL, import JDL command. And so yeah, that's pretty much it. As you can see, it was like pretty easy to add, to create a JHipster app with Vue.js, pretty easy to add like new entities. And then if you want to make changes, that's the main thing about JHipster. You generate your app, but then you can do whatever you want. So here I can, if I want to create a new page, if I want to create, for example, like a new element in the menu, I can simply, change the files and everything. And everything will be like already configured with Vue, and you will be able to use the JSON for the languages, and internationalization. And yeah. So let me go back to my slide. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the demo. I don't have other things to show, so maybe we can do like the Q&A session. I think I saw some question, maybe some. Let me take a look. I saw some like question maybe on the chat.
Yeah, so we have one from, I think, Roman.
Okay.
So his question is, what is the priority for future development for JHipster between Angular, React, and Vue? Are there any data on adoption for each generator and trends?
Yeah, so that's a pretty good question because like I show you, the Vue.js like component is a blueprint right now. So the idea is to have it integrated into the main generator. So, you know, that way it's like easier to manage because it could be like quite a bit complex, you know, to first, oh, you install the blueprints and then you need to use the blueprints. The goal is to have it directly into JHipster. So that way you can like, you know, choose Vue.js directly. And for the priority, I think they want to maintain both Angular, React, and Vue. And when there's like new version coming up, everything is updated like pretty fast. So, you know, it's there's never like a generator, like for example, the Angular version that is like pretty old. It's always like up to date. I know, like I said before, like they were like, you know, working on the .NET for the backend, for example, and the Node.js. So again, I would say JHipster, just follow the trends. Whatever is like trending, it will, you know, do a blueprint or just integrate it into the main generator. Okay, also I see, do you manage the changes in JDL file and the change you do directly in the project? So yeah, that's a pretty good question. So what I recommend doing is when you generate entities, you know, you commit whatever, and then if you make changes into the JDL, so I'm just going to do, okay, let me maybe close that so you guys can see more. Yeah, I'm just going to add, you know, everything and then just do a commit. I'm just going to say entities generation. Okay, and now let's say, oh, I have a new JDL. It's not a new JDL, but you know, I have a new entity. So here, I don't know, I'm going to add entity, I don't know, person, and then let's say name string. So here I can like simply, you know, re-import my JDL. It should be able to detect the new entity. And you see here it found entity person. And what it means is that is smart enough to know there's only one new entity. You can see here, it only generated everything that is related to a person. It didn't generate anything related to bank account, label, or operations. So then, you know, JHipster is like smart enough to know, oh yeah, those entities already exist, so I don't have to regenerate them. If you want more details about it, here there's a .folder, .jhipster, that contains basically the entities, can I say, like definition. So for example, bank account, you know, you have everything related to bank account. So yeah, like I say, like JHipster is pretty smart. You know, you don't have to worry. And again, everything is on Git. So if you're being smart, like the way you commit files and everything, you're not gonna have like a lot of issues by regenerating your JDL. Okay, are there plans for other backends to work with JHipster at the same level as with Spring? Yeah, so like I said, there's the, we can take a look at it right now, but there's the Node.js, the .NET. I honestly don't know exactly the status of those projects, but yeah, I mean, you know, people like, they want to use JHipster with like other things than Spring Boot. So for example, here you can use Node.js. Again, I don't know if it's like fully functional, but you know, feel free to use it. I know there's also a .NET one. And I think if we go back on the main page, there's, yeah, you can also use Micronaut or Quarkus. But again, if you want something, if you want to go to production, I will recommend Spring Boot because, you know, again, that's the main, the main framework that is fully working right now. Okay. I don't know if we have like other questions.
It looks like Nicholas might have a question. Let me see. Nicholas, can you respond in the chat if you still have a question? I see that your hand's raised.
Okay, I think I already answered the question from Nicholas.
Oh, okay, got it. I guess I missed that.
There's a new one from Charles. Yeah, so after you use JHipster, so yeah, when you generate a project with JHipster, or do you like keep up to date with, let's say you have a new version of Angular or like a new version of Spring Boot or whatever? So that's there's a I don't know if it's I'm curious to know if it's here, but yeah, upgrading an application. So there's a command to do that. You can run JHipster upgrade, and what it will do is it will like create a branch, and update the version of JHipster on this branch, and everything is fine. It will just ask you to merge the branch back. So the idea is that you have your JHipster project, then there's a new version of, let's say, Angular. Slowly after, you will have a new version of JHipster that integrate the new version of Angular. So then you can just run the command JHipster upgrade, and again, it will like do everything for you. You might have some issues if you like change the files that were generated by JHipster. But if you don't do that, it should be like straightforward. Also, there's a manual way of doing it. So yeah, I mean, it's already supported and everything. So again, as long as the JHipster team release the new version of JHipster that supports the new version of Angular, you will be able to do the upgrade.
All right, I think that's all the questions we have.
Okay, cool. Let me stop the share. All right.
All right, great. Well, thanks so much, Theo, for coming on and sharing all of this with us. Really appreciate it. Yeah, and for everyone who's attended, thanks for coming. We'll be sure to upload this hopefully within the next week or so to the YouTube channel. But again, thanks everybody for coming, and we'll see you at the next meetup.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Oh, yes, right, from Tracy. Please be sure to submit your proposals if you want to do lightning talks in July. And if you have questions, reach out to us at Vue.js DC@gmail.com. All right, talk to everybody later.